Hello and welcome to Camp Xbox. In 2009, the beloved Watchmen comic was getting its long-awaited movie adaptation. This was both looked at with excitement and with some skepticism from fans, yet any big movie release would come with talks of a video game version. And with that, we got Watchmen: The End is Nigh, a game released in 2 parts, and I played them recently. I'm gonna give you some history, lasting impact, and my review. All footage was captured off of an Xbox 360, and I want to thank my YouTube channel members for their support. But let's go ahead and hop into this one. Watchmen has an extremely long history, and I'll try to give you a condensed version for time, but no, it's one of the most influential limited series comic runs ever. Written by Alan Moore with art from Dave Gibbons during its 1986 to 1987 run by DC Comics, it was highly celebrated and to this day is considered one of the greatest graphic novels of all time. Satirizing superheroes and talking about Cold War tensions, the plot offered something profound. Of course, though, as with most media and considering DC Comics, it wasn't going to stay in that form forever. Though comic prequels and sequels wouldn't come till much later, the idea for a Watchmen movie was pushed out really fast, though this would be in development hell for decades. It finally got into the hands of director Zack Snyder, and it would be worked on and ready for a 2009 release. With that, in early 2008, Warner Bros. Interactive announced a 2-part game that would coincide with the theatrical and then the DVD release of the movie. They wanted to go into digital releases through PC, PSN, and Xbox Live Arcade because it allowed them to have more flexibility on time and budget rather than releasing a huge game that would be lost at retail. The game would be developed by Deadline Games, who made the Total Overdose games. The connections to Watchmen would be there, although Alan Moore would not put his name on it. The editor of the original comic would write the story and make it a prequel to the comics. Also, artist Dave Gibbons would be a consultant for the game. I remember hype was there along with the movie for this one. It even was a cover story for Electronic Gaming Monthly in December of 2008. It would make its release on all digital platforms on March 4th, 2009, and Part 2 would release on August 26, 2009. Personally, I'm a huge fan of Watchmen. It's a graphic novel I've reread multiple times in my life. I especially loved it when the movie was coming out in 2009, and I saw the movie at a midnight launch when it came out, and I really enjoyed it, and I still do to this day. I can understand that it's hard to try and capture Watchmen on film, but I think the movie does a good job. I was excited about the game, and I played it when Part 1 was new, and I disliked it, and I just kind of abandoned it. But now I wanted to go back, and I played through both Part 1 and Part 2 fully. I'm not splitting them up for this review because after going through them, I found that my criticisms were about the same for both releases except in a few small places, and I'll point that out in my review. But let me break it all down for you, starting with the plot.
You'd better back off, son. You don't know who you're dealing with.
Filthy degenerate about to swallow riding crop.
I'd let the senator go if I were you, Rorschach. The police would be so angry if someone got hurt in a place they've sworn to protect.
Too bad for you, police are on strike.
Every other element of End is Nigh is pretty much the same when talking about this game as a whole, but the plot is the most significant difference. Both parts of this game are different stories set at different times. Part 1 takes place in 1972 and has the larger scale story of the both of them. Both Rorschach and Night Owl go to Sing Sing to stop a riot going on and realize that the mob boss, the Undertaker, has escaped. They trek across the city going from nightclubs, shipyards, and amusement parks to find him, even though there is a more sinister conspiracy hidden under the plot. Part 2 takes place in 1977 and is unrelated to the first story. Both Night Owl and Rorschach are looking for a girl named Violet Green who has been kidnapped by the Twilight Lady, and they're forcing her to be in adult films. I enjoyed the plot of Part 1 more than Part 2, but I wouldn't say it's fantastic. This is a far cry from the comics, but to be fair, I don't think an arcade game in this era would pack the same punch as the comics. Here, it just facilitates who you're going to be fighting. The first story does at least feel huge and has you traveling all across the city. The full motion comics with loads of Watchmen characters give it some life. It is just a simple manhunt at the end of the day, but it works. It gives a glimpse as to what it was like fighting crime for the both of them. Part 2 is very much an afterthought, with half the chapters and playtime from the first one, and the first one's really short. This plot of a girl being kidnapped into a seedy underworld has been done better in movies like Hardcore and even features the same type of ending. This is stretched to its possible limit with long fights and much less cutscenes. Also, this one just feels silly and doesn't even come close to the comics. It felt like they wanted to release 2 games and could only think of one decent story. When you look at it as a whole, which it was released on disc that way, it ends up feeling weak. One half is decent and the other half feels forced. It's just a mixed bag of a plot overall, which Watchmen doesn't need a plot that weak. That being said, it is a game, so let's take a look at the gameplay and see what entertainment we can get out of that. Nigh is a 3D brawler. You can play as either Night Owl or Rorschach, alone or with a co-op partner. You go through each area and beat up enemies. Other than a few moments where you split off from each other, this is all of your gameplay. There's no deviation at all, and it's pretty repetitive. Some games can do the 3D brawler setup and be fun, but here it just doesn't work. The combat isn't bad, not at all. If you like the Batman Arkham games, you'll feel right at home here. The counter attacks aren't a thing, but you can do heavy and light hits and combo them to do more damage. You also get a throw, which I absolutely love. The physics and feel of tossing bad guys around is so much fun and easily the best part of the game. The punches are just a bit slow though. Enemies have much more health than you'd expect, and this game throws a ton at you. So while not hard, it just takes you a while to get through them. This is because you have to use combos to do the most damage, and to do combos, you have to space out your hits really slowly. It's a rhythm that's not remotely fast, so you slowly tap the button to hit. It makes combat feel sluggish, which makes sense for a sense of realism, but not so much for fun. Not only that, but knocking out people on the ground takes an extra hit, and it's a long animation to take them out. Doing this for everyone makes every battle long. And then the game only throws this at you for 3 to 4 hours, and it ends up feeling tedious and too repetitive. I don't think the combat's bad, and I did have some fun, but there needed to be something else here, or it needed to be faster to make it entertaining. However, this is the single-player experience, and I imagine playing with a friend would make this better. The game even has co-op moments that split the game up, even if you're playing with an AI. Night Owl is the only one who can lift garage doors for whatever reason, and then Rorschach goes under, and there's so many places with locked doors that can only be opened by pulling the same lever at the same time. It's really not doing anything new here, but any game is better with somebody else. I do like that at least both characters play differently. Attacks for both feel different, and the meter in which you build attacks do something different. Night Owl will shock everyone around him, and Rorschach will go into a rage knocking down people. These are nice touches, and though I think Rorschach has the better fighting style, Night Owl has a more useful super move, making this a game where playing both characters has its benefits, which I think is nice. On this front, both parts are exactly the same, and I had no different feelings either way. Both offer the same repetitive gameplay, and had me wishing for something a little different. One thing I love in this game is the full motion comic cutscenes. They are gorgeous with a lot of the same colors and style that the original comic used. The slight movements gives it life, and here it captures Watchmen very well. It's a joy to see more art in this style, and it offers more depth to the comics. It also helps elevate the plot a little bit. The look of the game overall is fine. I don't think it has a bad style. It's muddy and gray, but that captures the 70s perfectly. you aren't going to have amazing fidelity, but this is a great looking arcade game for 2008. I think it shines with its effects, like the rainy streets that have a nice look and the fires in the prison. Though most areas do feel a bit barren and lacking in detail, I do think the variety in environments does help this game out a little bit. That being said though, this game does not run the best. For both parts, there's a ton of screen tearing issues. Also, when there's many enemies on screen, you can feel the frame rate dip. This is especially noticeable in Part 2, where the endurance run of the levels have a really hard chug. It makes it hard to enjoy the visuals and gameplay when it runs this poorly, and I'm not sure why it's optimized so poorly when it isn't really breaking Xbox hardware by any means, but at least it could be nice at times. It just has some issues.
First. Then it's up to the jury to decide her fate.
Disappointed in you, Dan. Letting emotions interfere with sense of justice. Sign of weakness.
Well, sometimes things aren't as black and white as that mask you wear. Maybe you should try viewing the world in a wider spectrum once in a while.
Don't be afraid of his mask, girls. He's just another
So at first I thought the voice acting from the movie stars Jackie Earle Haley and Patrick Wilson were bad. I was surprised by that because I think both are good actors, but I think it's more of a writing issue here. I think both are fine in terms of quality, but some of the lines that they're forced to deliver are rough. Night Owl and Rorschach say some lame lines, and they're hard to sit through. I really don't think this is like the comics by any means, and honestly, it's a bit groan-worthy. I like the authenticity on display getting them, and I commend that, but the material just isn't great and kind of brings it down. Though for more movie cred, composer Tyler Bates returns to do the music here, and that's solid. The fighting music is a bit repetitive, but it's big and bombastic, which I can appreciate. I like the use of the symphony and how it ramps up whenever you're in battles to feel huge. It's also a good sign to use when enemies are still around if that battle music is still playing. The music works with the punches and kicks, which I found zero issues with. All sound effects blended well together, and the audio is pretty good, but the writing for the dialogue is not. Watchmen: The End is Nigh does not live up to the comic or even the movie, but I don't think it was going to. That's a hard place to reach, so I'll try not to compare it hard to the comics, but it is needed to be said that the plot and dialogue here is a far stretch away. The plot on its own is fine, with one half being better than the other. I think the combat is fun but too repetitive, and the game just needed a lot more to do or more speed to keep it entertaining. And finally, this game chugs hard with some frame rate issues, making for a mediocre game. I don't think it's unplayable, and throwing around people is a laugh, but it's not entertaining for all of its playtime. Out of the 12 Xbox Live Arcade games I've reviewed on the channel, End is Nigh 2 goes in at 11, and Part 1 goes in at number 10. Part 1 wins out because of its plot, and I think both are better than Dash of Destruction in terms of content and overall quality, but Crazy Taxi is far more replayable. When Watchmen Part 1 came out, it received mixed reviews according to Metacritic with a score of 55, and Part 2 received a much lower 44. The complete package has a score of 56. Watchmen would get a 5 out of 10 from IGN, saying that the whole package was boring. Official Xbox Magazine would give the first part a 7, saying the game looked great and the ending was rough, and then they would drop the score for Part 2 down to a 4.5, saying it overuses the same mechanics from the first part and was way too short. Public reception seems to not be much better, with Part 1 having a 2.1 and Part 2 having a 2.2 average on Backlogged. Reviews on the website seem to pretty much agree that this is a rough release, and that would be it for Watchmen games, which we have never seen a return to. The movie has its fans and would later be deemed profitable, even though theatrically it was a disappointment, but Watchmen would have more success in that field, getting a TV show and an animated movie recently, as well as a slew of new comics. And all of those things, good or not, that's up to you to decide, but no matter what, the comic lives on as one of the greatest comics ever made. But that does wrap it up for today. If you enjoyed this review, please leave a like, it really helps me out in the algorithm. Subscribe to keep up with the retro Xbox content. Leave a comment below with any memories of this game, love it or hate it. And check out my second channel, Camp Extras, for more retro content. And I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube channel members. Thank you so much for your support. But I'll see you here next time at Camp Xbox.